But there is no forest of Arden, there is no island of Illyria, so you don't have these Midsummer Night's Dream kind of forests where fairies come and change you completely. No romances at all in comedies. Hello and welcome back to Nibblepop. We are doing this series on history of English literature, and today in this video we are going to look at the Restoration Age. Now, while looking at the Restoration Age, it is better to first look at the historical aspect of the age and then look at the various literary genres that flourished during the times. Stay with me till the end of this video and subscribe to my channel if you have not done so yet. Share with your friends and comment anything that comes to your mind regarding the Restoration Age in the comment section of this video. This is Monami Mukherjee. Welcome once again. As we were discussing the Puritan age, we saw that the Puritan regime had been too severe, too strict. The theatres were closed down, all the modes of entertainment, they were curtailed. So naturally, people felt that their natural impulses were repressed. Now, once this restraint was taken away, once the Puritan government that fell and Charles II, he was restored to the throne, the people of England, they kind of felt this freedom from the restraints and started to get indulged in even lawlessness at times. There were excesses observed in various aspects of life. They were getting more drunk, they were having more parties, they were spending more on entertainment because now they felt freer than before. Now we know that Charles II, he was put on the throne of England as a replacement of the existing government, and people felt very happy about this promising young man. But what kind of a king was Charles II? Did he meet the expectation of his people? Well, he was a person who was so vile, he did not have the basic sense of morality even, be it private life, be it public life. Everywhere he emphasized the need to entertain himself, ending up having lots of affairs and at the same time stealing from the public exchequer. So it was a kind of rule that is quite detestable. You don't want your ruler to be like that. But people of England, they were like, okay, fine, we have brought the king back, so let's just be a little more. So this was happening on the throne of England at the time. Now, since the time of the parliamentary government, there was always this clash of power between the king and the parliament. In this situation, two political parties, they emerged in the political scene of England, Whigs and the Tories. Now, Whigs were those people who wanted the parliament to be stronger so that the tyranny of kings could be checked. Tories, on the other hand, they wanted the hereditary rulers, that is the kings, to stay powerful, and they wanted to curb the power of the parliament. And eventually this led to a two-party system government and opposition between the two. But remember these two words, Whigs and Tories. You can say the Tories were the royalists and Whigs, they fought for the empowerment of the parliament. Now interestingly, after 4 years of misrule, Charles II, he wanted to set up a kind of Catholicism all throughout England, which was opposed by both Tories and Whigs alike. So this was where they came together, and when the power of people come together, then kings really lose their thrones, and this happened in the bloodless revolution, which eventually led to the crowning of William the Orange to the throne in 1688. So this was the political scenario. What was happening in the literary scene? Now we have seen that people like Milton and even Bunyan, they represent a kind of moral stand, a kind of strength. And after the Restoration, since the general literary scene was dominated by the existing sentiments which were completely anti-Puritan, so that led to a certain kind of theatre, a certain kind of poetry to develop during this time. If we can categorically divide the tendencies of this age, we can say that realism was a very important tendency. Earlier there were these unrealistic representations in literature, but during the Restoration age, we see that realism, what is happening actually all around you, that becomes the focus of literature, be it poetry, be it drama, be it anything. The second tendency is there is a preference for direct and simple way of expressing yourself, because in case of Elizabethan theatre, and especially in case of Milton, you can say that there was a tendency to use ornate expressions, ornamental language. In case of Restoration literature, you have these preference for everyday expressions, direct statements, simple language, and easy to understand style in case of poetry, drama and prose. So this was the second tendency which we observe during the Restoration age. The third thing that we find in case of Restoration literature is a kind of preference for formalism. That is, you follow set rules and regulations regarding forms of poetry, drama and everything. Now this tendency was kind of influenced by the French literature during the times, because this was the time when England was under, you can say, the second phase of French influence. Alright, so along with the language, the writing style, the content, the themes, they were also kind of imported from France and applied to English literature. So if you talk about general tendencies, irrespective of the genres, you can say that people of England, they were interested in realism, in formalism and in direct and simple expressions. Now, if we are to look at the important genres which developed during the Restoration age, we will definitely talk about the development in drama and development in poetry. Now, first let us look at what happened in the theatres of England. So, first we will talk about general tendencies in drama, and then we will have more focused discussion on Restoration tragedies and then Restoration comedies. Now, theatres were closed during the Puritan regime. After the Restoration, the theatres were opened, but now the plays which were performed were different from the plays that were being performed before the closing of the theatres. The audience of drama during this time was both middle class and upper class. So there was a more pronounced interest in drama so far as the middle class was concerned. These plays depended a lot on weird plots, strange staging devices and dramatized language. It's like playwrights were more concerned with the commercial aspect of producing plays than the artistic aspects. And they did all these alterations with Shakespearean plays, and they felt that they were doing Shakespeare a favor by revising and improving his text. Now, let's first look at Restoration tragedy. Restoration tragedy is also known as heroic tragedy, and it was directly influenced by French romances. Some people also prefer to call it heroic drama. So, when you hear the term heroic tragedy or heroic drama, immediately connect it to Restoration tragedy. These plays were written in the classical model with rhymed heroic couplet. Heroic couplet is something which you associate with epics, but here it is used in drama. And later blank verse was also used in writing of these heroic tragedies. What were the usual themes of these tragedies? Usually the themes of love and honor, these heroes and heroines on grand scale. Okay, these were very basic ingredients of these plays. You can almost see superhuman heroes in there with superhuman passions, completely unrealistic. And now you'll ask me, then how you are saying that realism was a part of it? But you can say that heroic tragedies, they were kind of an exception to the rule that restoration literature is about realism and moderation of language and all. Usually every play had a hero, heroine and a villain, and this villain used to be a very dominating character. Now interestingly, from around 1660s to 1670s, these plays were male dominated. But later, after 1670s, 1680s, you find a lot of focus on women characters. John Dryden is considered to be the most famous writer of heroic tragedies. To name a few, he wrote plays like The Conquest of Granada, Tyrannic Love, and All for Love. All for Love is very popular, it's still popular now. Other heroic dramatists were Nathaniel Lee and Thomas Otway. Otway wrote plays like Alcibiades, Don Carlos, The Orphan, and Venice Preserved. So what you can understand is restoration tragedies, as these names of the plays suggest too, they offer a kind of noble theme and noble treatment of characters, of story. And now coming to comedies, we see a completely different thing. The type of comedy which flourished during the Restoration age is also called the comedy of manners. Now what does manner mean? Manners means the way you act in presence of people, in society, your etiquettes, your expressions, your movements, your relationships. All these things constitute manner. So man in society will always exhibit some kind of manner, and comedy of manners, they focus on these behavioral patterns in human beings in society. Why comedy of manners? Because it is usually seen that men and women, they behave in very comical ways at times without even realizing that that kind of a behavior can often produce a lot of laughter in people who are watching. What were the themes of these plays? These plays reflected the dissolute court life of the times. Dissolute means where people act out of impulses without considering the moral implications. The excesses, they are reflected in these plays. The peculiarities of people are reflected in these plays. And so far as content is concerned, fashionable intrigues, sex, marriage, adultery, these things are treated with cynicism, with satire, with mockery. And that is the style of comedy of manners. So you cannot say it is immoral. You cannot say it is moral. It's basically amoral, which means it has nothing to do with morals. It will show you what's happening all around. You decide what you make of it. The comedy of manners as a genre, it's not an emotional genre. It's not like you have a lot of fiery expressions, okay, appealing to your emotions. No, it is based on the ideas of realism, on the ideas of intellectual wit. And therefore, it replaces poetry with clear, concise prose. Earlier, during the Elizabethan times, we have poetry in drama. And even in those instances where we have prose dramas, we have poetic passages. But here in Comedy of Manners, we see that everyday language of man or woman that is being used, and people don't speak in rhymes in real life. So why should characters of drama speak in rhymes? And therefore, we don't have use of any poetry in case of Comedy of Manners. So far as relationships are concerned, something very interesting happened. Earlier, you see, the love between man and woman, especially I'm talking about the times when this courtly love tradition was very much popular, women were treated as either goddesses or somebody who was abused. So her physical aspect was taken into consideration, usually. But here we see for the first time, rather I would say, that the intellectual side of woman, that is also being focused on. It's as if a proper relationship between two individuals that can form out of an intellectual companionship. And that kind of idea is seen in case of Comedy of Manners. A woman, she is not to be won by devotion or lust, but by intelligence, brilliance or wit, charming manners. So physical bravery was not considered heroic in that way. So you can say passion is replaced with manners, and the attitude is very easy and graceful. The characters in Restoration Comedy of Manners, they are mostly types, and you can guess what kind of character these people are from their names. You have characters like Sir Fopling Flutter, Horner, Scrub, Sir John Brute, Squire Sullen, Lady Bountiful, Lady Fanciful, Mrs. Marwood, Mrs. Fainall, etc. So these names, they suggest the kind of actions these characters might be preferring to do or perform, and their temperaments. But don't get confused between Comedy of Manners and Comedy of Humours. Comedy of Humours was Ben Jonson's comedy. There also we encounter types, but here it's more in tune with realism. The real types we see in society, presented in realistic lights, realistic situations. Who were the writers of Comedy of Manners? I'll begin with the most popular one, William Congreve. Congreve is still read with a lot of enthusiasm and is prescribed all across syllabi of various universities in both UG and PG level. His famous comedies are, The Old Bachelor, and we have The Double Dealer, Love for Love, and The Way of the World. Way of the World is actually, most popular, like among students at least. Way of the World is considered to be, the best example of Comedy of Manners, and you have all these things there, the brilliant, sparkling dialogue, you have wit, construction of plot, characterization, all amazing. So, Way of the World is very good so far as Comedy of Manners are concerned. Then you have George Etheridge. He wrote plays like The Comical Revenge, She Would If She Could, The Man of Mode, or Sir Fopling Flutter. Just look at the names, She Would If She Could. What kind of a name is that? These titles, they are so anti-romantic. There is nothing glorious and glamorous about it, and at the same time, you have a lot of intelligence in the way characters are developed in these plays. But there is no Forest of Arden, there is no Island of Illyria, so you don't have these Midsummer Night's Dream kind of forests where fairies come and change you completely. No romances at all in comedies. Whatever little romantic feelings, or rather I should say, whatever little fascination for the romantic or for the heroic is there, it is found in the heroic play, that is the tragedies. But in comedies, you have the stupidities, the weirdness, and at the same time, the fantastic human interactions which actually happen in everyday life. In Etheridge, we find a great picture of the upper class mostly, and their peculiarities. In Congreve also we see that usually the principal characters, they belong to the higher class of people. The next writer I'm going to talk about is Sir John Van Brahms, and his best comedies are The Relapse, The Provoked Wife, yes, that's another weird title we have, and Confederacy. The first two plays are, conventional comedy of manners, like they follow the usual style of comedy of manners, but in Confederacy he breaks new ground. He brings in middle class characters and the focus is on them. So in that way he is innovative. Speaking of weird title, there is another writer who wrote a play called Love and a Bottle, and the name of this playwright was George Farquhar. He wrote other plays like The Constant Couple, Sir Harry Wildhair, The Inconstant, The Way to Win Him, The Recruiting Officer, and The Buse Stratagem. Buse Stratagem is still taught in many universities. He is also very much like Van Brahms in Confederacy, that he takes his material from the life and experience of the middle class. So that is a speciality of George Farquhar. When it comes to William Wycherley, his comedies are a bit more harsh. The problem with Wycherley was that fundamentally he had these conservative, almost Puritan impulses, and he wanted to understand the connection between creativity and morals, and at the same time he was witnessing an age when all these considerations were considered obsolete. And we see this conflict in his plays. He's trying to adjust to the changing times, try to look at things in a different way than he wants to. And there are interesting stories in his plays. In his play called The Country Wife, for example, he presents a jealous husband whose wife is having an affair, and at the same time he presents that this wife is hiding the affair, and this is justified because the husband is basically an abuser. So her hiding of her affair is shown as an acceptable thing because the husband threatens constantly to stab her, kill her. His masterpiece, The Plain Dealer, is based on the French writer Molaire's The Misanthrope, and this is a story of a sea captain and his relationship problems. So that's quite unusual too. So you have a lot of variety, although when you hear the term comedy of manners, you tend to have this feeling that it's a single unit with a set of conventions, with a set of rules which a set of people followed. But no, there were so many writers who exercised their innovative skills and tried to break away from the established traditions. But on an average, a comedy of manner, one single play which claims to be a comedy of manner, shows number one, wit, number two, realism, of course, and number three, a certain cynical attitude towards established conventions. And why people were enraged? People at one point, they were not very happy with comedy of manners, because what is the most widespread convention that you see all around you? Marriage. It's a social convention. So when a particular genre challenges a convention and ends up challenging a convention like marriage, like an institution like marriage, then there comes a problem. And that is why comedy of manners are even considered to be antisocial or against society. But as I have already told you once, that it is neither immoral nor moral. It doesn't bother about morality. It's more interested in showing what things are, how things are happening. It's neither revolutionary nor romantic, it's realistic. Now, when drama is prioritizing realism, what is poetry doing during the Restoration Age? So let's just look at the kind of things that the poets were interested in during the time. Poetry during the Restoration Age was satirical, realistic, and there was this use of the heroic couplet. Couplet means a pair of lines, and heroic couplet means something which was originally used in the epics. Dryden is considered to be the master of the heroic couplet, and in fact this short age which we are talking about today, this is also called the Age of Dryden. And the next age, that is the 18th century, the long 18th century, which is called the Age of Prose and Reason, is also called the Age of Pope and Augustan Age. Three things define the nature of poetry during these times. One is moderation, one is realism, and a third is reason. So this is very much like what was happening with theatres. These are the same focus points. So far as major developments are concerned, first and foremost we should talk about verse satire. Satire can be defined as a literary way of mocking something, belittling something, by making it look funny and ridiculous, and eventually expressing a sense of amusement or disgust. The style of a satirist is of course very different from that of a lyricist. A lyricist has this soft way of talking about things, and the satirist is more hard on people because he finds the actions of people, the manners of people comical and at the same time disgusting. Restoration Age is essentially an age of satire. Judging, criticizing, these were part of people's ways of interacting with each other, because with these interactions between high class people and middle class people who have a lot of time to think about other people's lives, naturally they end up criticizing other people through rumors and gossips, and this led to the spirit of satire, which got very popular during the times. And at the same time the French influence was there, which kind of encouraged people to write verse satires. Now we will talk about a particular genre which can be seen as an extension of the verse satire or a specialized form of verse satire, which is the mock epic. Verse satire can be of any length, it can be on any theme or any person, but mock epics are special forms of verse satire, you can say, where the conventions of a regular epic, they are followed and at the same time subverted. Subverted means you go off the book. Like there are these formal invocations to the muse, but the muse is somebody who is not a god or goddess but an ordinary man. The title of the mock epics, they appear to be extremely noble and glorified, but if you know the story behind it, you would know that these are all satiric attacks. So a mock epic is a type of satire, you can say, which imitates in a sustained way for a long time, like it's over a pretty long length, because it's epic after all, mock epic or not, it's an epic. So it imitates in a sustained way both the elaborate form and ceremonious style of epics, but applies to narrate a very ignoble, mundane, ordinary subject, theme or person or a set of persons. And usually the themes are well known incidents that people know about, because if you are to make fun of something, and then first you have to narrate what has happened, then you have to make fun of it, then it will be lost. So you have to write on things which people are aware of, the trending topics. So these were satires and mock epics. They were written on things people were interested in and were aware of during the times. And how is this satire created? Use of irony, use of overstatement, hyperbole, exaggeration, criticism, use of oxymoron, using opposite words together to create an impact. So different kinds of rhetorical devices were used to create this effect. John Dryden was, as I have already told you, the most illustrious writer of first satires and mock epics. He wrote political satires, doctrinal poems, and fables. His most famous works include Absalom and Achitophel, Religio Laici. In his poems, what we really see is like all the characteristics of Restoration age poetry is reflected. So it's like it's back calculated. We take Dryden's poem and then say that this is what Restoration poetry is about. And that is why it's the Age of Dryden. If I am to mention one more poet of the times, I should not omit Samuel Butler. He is known for his work Hudibras. Hudibras was published in 3 parts and it's a bitter satire against Puritanism. So no wonder he was very popular during his times. It achieved a lot of popularity. Charles too was so impressed with Hudibras that he awarded, or rather rewarded, Samuel Butler with cash prize. Among the other poets, I have already talked about Marvell when I was talking about metaphysical poetry. Marvell was writing during this time, but we cannot call him a Restoration age writer in that sense. It was metaphysical poetry in its declining phase. Marvell was an exception in that sense. And we have poets like Oldham. So I've tried to give you certain names of poems written by these poets. It's not feasible to give the complete list of all poets and poems, that will overcrowd this palette. So I've tried to give you details about the important poets and their works. But when you read history of English literature, instead of memorizing these names of poets and poems and years, you should first focus on the basic characteristics of a particular age. And that will give you a kind of confidence, because it's okay to forget dates. I myself often forget a lot when it comes to dates. But it's not okay to forget why the Puritan government was replaced by a monarchy when the people of England had earlier decided to get rid of the king. It's not okay to confuse between the preference for romance and romantic fascination found during the Middle Ages with romantic realism, which we find in Shakespeare. After this, we will be looking at the long 18th century, which is basically an age of prose and reason, and we will be focusing on rise of novels, on emergence of periodical essays, and many interesting facts about 18th century, which apparently feels like a pretty boring age. So let's see in the next video how we can enliven that age, how we can look at it in an exciting way. I hope you have liked my class on Restoration Age. If you want to add any comments, I will be waiting for your comments in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching this video. Do like, share and subscribe. Thank you all for being with us. This is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Stay happy, stay safe. Bye-bye.